In the heart of nowhere, a single mother looking to rebuild her life buys an abandoned train station. What she thinks is a simple project quickly turns into the discovery of a lifetime, one that will not only change her family's future but also unravel a web of secrets buried for decades. The treasure she uncovers isn't gold or jewels, but something far more priceless. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. If you love stories like this, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode is even more unbelievable than this one. Let's get started. Claire Collins stood at the edge of the old train station, her boots sinking slightly into the dry, cracked earth. The rusted track stretched out before her, disappearing into the horizon where the sun hung low, casting an orange glow over the dilapidated structure. A small sigh escaped her lips, the weight of the past few months pressing down on her shoulders. She had never imagined her life would come to this, starting over in a forgotten corner of the world, but she had no other choice. At 33, Claire was a single mother, with a 6-year-old son, Ethan, and a laundry list of bills that seemed to grow faster than she could pay them. Her divorce had drained her savings, and the thought of starting fresh in a new town, away from the life she once knew, felt like a shot in the dark. But when she saw the ad for this abandoned train station, she couldn't resist. It was cheap, secluded, and seemed like the perfect fixer-upper. "I can do this," she muttered to herself, giving the peeling station a long look. "It's just an old building. How hard can it be?" She knew it wasn't just the building she was trying to fix. It was her life. The struggles of the past year had chipped away at her confidence, leaving her with nothing but the hope that maybe, just maybe, a new start, in a new place, could help her rebuild everything. Ethan's eyes were wide as he ran through the empty station yard, his laughter echoing against the walls. "I think this place is a castle," Ethan shouted, his voice filled with wonder. Claire smiled softly. "It's not quite a castle, kiddo," she replied, kneeling beside him and brushing a hand through his messy hair. "But it's ours." The house was far from grand, crumbling walls, overgrown weeds, and windows so dirty it was hard to see through. But Claire saw potential. The building, though battered and neglected, still had its charm. The wooden beams above creaked with history, and the stained glass windows, though cracked, offered a glimpse into a time long past. It was a project, sure, but it was a project that felt like it could give them both something new, a chance to start over. "Let's get to work, buddy," she said, ruffling his hair. "This place has a lot of stories to tell." With that, Claire took the first step inside, the door creaking loudly as she pushed it open. The air inside smelled of dust, mildew, and something else, something faint, like old wood and forgotten memories. Ethan skipped ahead, his curiosity running wild. The first room they entered was empty, save for a few scattered tools and an old trunk tucked into the corner. Claire's heart beat faster as she scanned the room. There was something here, something beyond the broken windows and cracked floors. This place felt like it had been waiting for them. "Mom, what's this?" Ethan asked, tugging at her sleeve. She turned, following his gaze to a large, heavy crate pushed against the far wall. "I'm not sure, but let's take a look," she said, her pulse quickening. Something about that crate, the way it was hidden away, as though it didn't belong, felt like the first clue in a story she hadn't even started to write. Claire kneeled beside the crate, her fingers brushing against the rough, weathered wood. The lid was sealed tightly, with old rope wrapped around it. She didn't know why she felt the sudden urge to open it, but the pull was undeniable. It was as though this forgotten corner of the station held the key to something much larger than a simple renovation. "Mom, do you think there's treasure inside?" Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts. Claire chuckled softly, trying to ease the tension building in her chest. "I'm not sure, but it's definitely something worth checking out." She grabbed the rope, pulling it away, revealing a rusty lock beneath. Her mind raced. What could be inside? Old tools? A forgotten piece of history? Taking a deep breath, Claire grasped the lock with trembling fingers. She pulled at it with all her strength, and with a sharp snap, it gave way. The lid creaked open, revealing its contents. Claire gasped as she peered inside. Wrapped in yellowing cloth, there were several large paintings. The colors, though muted from years of neglect, still shimmered with life. Claire's fingers trembled as she carefully pulled out one of the paintings, a portrait of a woman dressed in fine clothes, her eyes staring straight ahead with an intensity that made Claire's breath catch. The frame was old, intricately carved, and marked with what looked like faint symbols Claire couldn't quite place. "Mom, who's this?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet now, sensing the gravity of the moment. "I don't know, sweetie," Claire whispered, her eyes still locked on the portrait. "But these paintings, they're not just old pictures. These are real works of art." Her mind raced as she carefully examined the other pieces. Some were landscapes, others abstract, each one unique. But what struck her the most was the undeniable feeling that these paintings were more than just valuable. They were part of something far bigger. She stood there for a long moment, unsure of what to do. The faint smell of mildew lingered in the air, but the paintings themselves seemed to breathe a life of their own. The weight of their history, of their mystery, was pressing down on her. The world outside seemed to disappear as Claire stared at the art, realizing that what she had thought was just a simple home renovation was now something far beyond her expectations. The treasure she had discovered wasn't buried beneath the floorboards. It was far more than she could have ever dreamed of. Her mind raced with possibilities. How much were these worth? Who would want them? But before she could ask another question, Ethan tugged at her sleeve again, pulling her back to reality. "Mom, do you think we're supposed to keep these?" Claire looked down at her son, his face full of innocence and wonder, and for a moment, she wasn't sure what the right answer was. But one thing was certain: this was just the beginning of something that would change their lives forever. Claire sat down on the floor of the train station, the paintings carefully arranged around her. The dusty air was thick with mystery, and the unease that had settled in her chest refused to dissipate. She couldn't stop staring at the portraits, the landscapes, the forgotten masterpieces that seemed to whisper secrets from another time. There was something about them, something that made her wonder how they ended up hidden in a crate in the back of a derelict station. Ethan had wandered off, playing with an old clock he found, but Claire couldn't pull herself away from the paintings. One of them in particular caught her eye. A dark, moody portrait of a man with sharp features, his eyes piercing the viewer with an unsettling intensity. The artist had captured something raw in his expression, something that Claire couldn't quite place. It felt personal, like the artist knew him, and had painted not just his image, but his very soul. Her fingers brushed the edge of the frame, revealing a faint, almost unreadable inscription at the bottom. She squinted, trying to make out the letters, and as she read them aloud to herself, the name caught in her throat. Elias Drummond. Claire repeated the name several times, her curiosity piqued. She had never heard of him. The name didn't ring a bell, but it felt oddly familiar, as though she had seen it somewhere before. She quickly set the portrait aside and turned to the other paintings, hoping to find a clue that would lead her to this Elias Drummond. It didn't take long. As Claire flipped through the paintings, she found a landscape piece with the same signature. The brushstrokes were soft and sweeping, depicting a green valley with mountains looming in the distance. The colors were faded, but the beauty of the scene was still apparent. On the back of the canvas, another faint inscription: "Gifted to the Drummonds, 1912. Claire's heart skipped a beat. A gift? To the Drummonds? She had heard of the Drummond family. They were once wealthy art collectors, known for their expansive collection of rare paintings and artifacts. But that was a long time ago. The family had disappeared from the public eye decades ago, their legacy slipping into the shadows of history. Had they owned this station? Had they hidden these paintings here for some reason? With a mixture of excitement and dread, Claire grabbed her phone and quickly typed in the name, Elias Drummond. Her search led her to articles, some about his family's once prominent art collection, others speculating about their mysterious disappearance. But the most chilling discovery came in the form of an old auction listing from the early 1900s. A collection from Elias Drummond's estate was up for sale, but the pieces listed were never accounted for. The auction was cancelled mysteriously, and the collection was never seen again. This was no ordinary find. These paintings weren't just valuable. They were part of a lost legacy, a family's history, a story buried beneath the dust of time. The weight of the discovery settled on Claire's shoulders. She wasn't just holding on to forgotten art. She was holding on to something far greater, something dangerous. She looked at Ethan, who had returned and was holding his toy train, oblivious to the storm brewing in her mind. Her heart raced as the realization hit her she wasn't just fixing up an old station. She was uncovering a treasure trove that might have been hidden for a reason. The next morning, Claire was still reeling from the discoveries of the previous night. She had stayed up far too late, going over the articles, making mental connections, and piecing together what little she could about Elias Drummond's family. The more she dug, the more questions arose. But there was one thing that stood out. The Drummonds had disappeared without a trace. No one knew what happened to them, and their prized art collection had never been seen again. It was still early when the knock came at the door. Claire wasn't expecting anyone, especially not this early, but she walked across the creaky floor and opened it. Standing on the porch was a man in a sharp suit, sunglasses shielding his eyes, despite the morning sunday. He looked out of place here, surrounded by the overgrown weeds and decaying structure of the station. "Miss Collins?" the man asked, his voice low and smooth. "I'm Jacob Carrington. I represent an interested party." Claire's heart skipped a beat. "Interested in what?" she asked cautiously, keeping her voice steady despite the nervous energy coursing through her. Carrington smiled, a glint of something unreadable in his eyes. "I'm here about the art you found in the station," he said. "You're sitting on a gold mine, Miss Collins. My clients would be very interested in acquiring those pieces." Claire crossed her arms, her gut instinct telling her something was off. "How do you know about the paintings?" Carrington's smile faltered for a moment before he regained his composure. "My client has connections," he replied smoothly. "And let's just say, they've been looking for those paintings for quite some time." Claire felt a chill run down her spine. "How much are we talking about here?" He tilted his head slightly, considering her question. "Let's just say, enough to set you up for life," he said, his tone turning almost too smooth. "A number you wouldn't have to worry about again. All I need is for you to agree to sell." Claire's heart raced. The offer was tempting, $220 million for a few paintings, but something about this man, the way he spoke, made her uneasy. She hadn't even had the paintings properly appraised yet. How did he know so much? Why was he so eager to acquire them? "No," she said firmly. "I'm not selling anything just yet." Carrington didn't seem disappointed. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "That's a shame," he said, taking a step back. "But my offer stands. My clients are patient. When you're ready to make the right decision, you know where to find me." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the overgrown path. Claire stood there, her pulse pounding. His words echoed in her ears, and as she watched him leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than a simple offer to buy art. Something far more dangerous. She was in deeper than she realized. For days, Claire couldn't shake the memory of Jacob Carrington's visit. His words played over and over in her mind, and no matter how hard she tried to focus on the station's renovation, she couldn't stop thinking about the paintings. Why was Carrington so interested? What did his clients want with art that had been hidden for so long? Claire knew she had to learn more. She spent hours researching Elias Drummond and his family's collection. The more she dug, the more questions arose. According to the articles she found, the Drummonds had been prominent art collectors in the early 1900s, known for their opulent estates and rare acquisitions. But the family had vanished from public records around the time of World War II, and their art collection had mysteriously disappeared. Her gut told her that Carrington wasn't just after some lost treasure. There was a deeper story here, one that involved more than just money. Perhaps the paintings weren't merely valuable in monetary terms but tied to something far more significant, something the world had been hiding for decades. That night, Claire pored over the auction listings she had uncovered earlier. One stood out. A cancelled auction from 1,912 listed works by an artist named Elias Drummond, pieces that were never accounted for. The auction had been abruptly stopped, and the paintings never resurfaced. The connection between the Drummond family's disappearance and the art collection was undeniable. The paintings had been hidden, but why? Her thoughts were interrupted when Ethan ran into the room, his eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, you gotta see this." Claire followed him into the next room, where Ethan was standing by a small drawer in the back corner of the station. He had found another hidden compartment, this one much smaller than the crate. Inside were more old documents, and what appeared to be a family photo album. Claire's hands trembled as she flipped through the album. There, in the first few pages, was a photo of a young Elias Drummond with his wife, standing proudly next to a large golden frame. It was the same frame as one of the paintings she had found. Her heart pounded. It was all connected. The Drummonds weren't just art collectors. They were involved in something bigger, something she was just beginning to understand. The discovery in the photo album confirmed everything Claire had feared. The Drummond family's connection to the paintings wasn't just about art. It was about legacy, and now, it was her legacy too. But the question remained, why had these works been hidden away for so long? What was the Drummond family trying to protect? Claire decided to visit the local historical society, hoping to find more information about the Drummonds. The small office was tucked away in a corner of town, its walls lined with faded maps and historical photographs. As Claire spoke with the curator, an elderly woman named Mrs. Winthrop, she learned something crucial. The Drummonds, Mrs. Winthrop began, her voice steady but somber, were always a mysterious family. They had a reputation for acquiring priceless art, but there were whispers about their dealings. Rumors of a secret organization, one that worked in the shadows of the art world, ensuring certain pieces never saw the light of day. Claire's stomach sank as she listened. Could the paintings she had found be part of a hidden collection that had been kept off the radar for a reason? Was it possible that the Drummonds were involved in something illegal? Something that threatened not just their wealth but their safety? Mrs. Winthrop leaned in closer, lowering her voice. There are some who believe the Drummonds' disappearance wasn't an accident. Some say they were targeted by a powerful group who wanted their collection, and they did everything to ensure no one found it. You should be careful, Claire. There's more to this than just old paintings. Claire left the historical society, her mind spinning. She thought she had been uncovering a forgotten piece of history, but now, she realized that what she had stumbled upon was much darker. The Drummonds' disappearance, the hidden art, it all pointed to something far more dangerous. Ethan tugged at her sleeve, pulling her from her thoughts. She looked down at him, seeing the same curiosity in his eyes. But Claire's own curiosity had now been replaced by fear. Whatever she had uncovered, it wasn't just about restoring an old train station. It was about surviving a past that was trying to remain buried. The next few days passed in a haze of confusion and tension. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. She'd begun to notice strange cars passing by the train station, slow enough to be deliberate. Her phone buzzed constantly, with calls from unknown numbers that she ignored. The weight of her discovery, the paintings, and the sudden interest they were generating, was becoming too much to handle alone. It wasn't until one evening, while Claire was sitting with Ethan at the kitchen table, that she realized just how deep she was in. She had just finished explaining to Ethan why they couldn't keep the paintings in the house anymore when the doorbell rang. Claire froze. Ethan, sensing her hesitation, ran to the door. "Mom, it's Uncle Mark," Ethan exclaimed, his face lighting up. Claire exhaled a sigh of relief. Mark, her brother, had been one of the few people she trusted completely. He'd always supported her when things got tough, and after the divorce, he'd been a steady presence in their lives. "Hey sis," Mark said, smiling as he stepped inside. "Heard you found something interesting." His voice was casual, but Claire could tell there was an edge to it. He had always been curious about her little projects, but today, his interest seemed more intense. "Yeah," Claire said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I found some old paintings in the station. I don't really know much about them yet." Mark nodded, but Claire noticed the glint of something unreadable in his eyes. "You sure you're not getting in over your head with all of this? I mean, this place is a mess, and those paintings, well, they're worth a lot, right?" "Yeah, they're worth something," Claire replied cautiously. "But I'm not sure I want to get involved in all that. The paintings might be more trouble than they're worth." Mark's expression softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've got to be careful, Claire. There are people who would pay anything for something like that. You could set Ethan and yourself up for life." Claire shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know if that's what I want, Mark. I'm not looking to sell out." But Mark wasn't done. "Sometimes, it's not about what you want. It's about what's best for you and your son." He paused. "I'm just saying, you don't know who you're dealing with." That night, Claire locked the paintings in the back room, the weight of Mark's words hanging heavy in the air. Something about his visit bothered her, but she couldn't put her finger on it. It wasn't until the next day that the truth came to light. Mark wasn't just concerned. He was in on it. When Claire opened the back room to check on the paintings, she found the lock broken. Panic surged through her as she rushed inside. The crate was open, and the paintings were gone. She immediately called Mark, her voice shaking with anger. "Mark, where are they?" His voice was steady, almost too calm. "Don't worry, Claire. I'm just doing what I have to do." Her world crumbled around her. The one person she thought she could trust had betrayed her. Mark had taken the paintings, probably to sell them to the mysterious buyer Carrington had mentioned. Claire's heart sank as she realized the true danger she was in and the lengths people would go to for these priceless works of art. The realization hit Claire hard. Mark had taken the paintings. Her brother, the one person she thought would understand, had betrayed her for money. She didn't know whether to be furious or heartbroken. In that moment, she knew she couldn't trust anyone. Claire's first instinct was to call the police, but something held her back. What if the paintings were worth more than she could imagine? What if calling the authorities would only make things worse, drawing unwanted attention to her and Ethan? The more she thought about it, the more it felt like she was trapped in a game she didn't understand, a game where the stakes were too high for her to win. Instead of calling the police, Claire decided to take matters into her own hands. She needed answers, and she needed them quickly. She didn't know where Mark had taken the paintings or who he was selling them to, but she knew she had to find out before things spiraled even further out of control. The next morning, Claire drove to the address Carrington had given her, a high-rise building on the outskirts of town. She had a plan. If she couldn't find Mark, she could at least confront Carrington and get some answers. Maybe, just maybe, he could help her understand what was going on. When Claire arrived, the sleek building loomed in front of her like a fortress. She could feel the tension in her chest as she stepped into the elevator, her mind racing. What if Carrington was behind Mark's betrayal? What if he had been pulling the strings from the start? She wasn't sure what she was walking into, but she had to take the risk. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped into a lavish modern lobby. The receptionist looked up, eyes narrowing slightly when Claire approached. "Can I help you?" she asked coolly. "I'm here to see Jacob Carrington," Claire said, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. The receptionist paused, then nodded. "Right. He's expecting you." She made a call, and Claire was soon escorted to a penthouse office at the top of the building. Carrington was waiting for her. He stood by the large window, looking out at the city, his back to her. "I knew you'd come," he said without turning around. "You want the paintings back, don't you?" Claire didn't answer. She wasn't sure what to say anymore. "You're in over your head," Carrington continued, turning to face her with a smirk. "You've stepped into a world where there are no rules, Claire. No turning back." Claire's heart raced. She was in a dangerous game, but she wasn't about to lose. The silence in Carrington's penthouse was deafening. Claire stood in the middle of the sleek office, her mind racing. Everything had escalated far beyond her expectations. The paintings, Mark's betrayal, and now Carrington's cryptic words, everything pointed to a much larger, more dangerous web than she had ever imagined. Carrington's calm, almost patronizing demeanor made Claire's blood boil. "I told you, Claire," he said, leaning casually against his desk, his fingers steepling together. "You can't just stumble into this world and expect to walk out unscathed. You've opened a door, and there's no shutting it now." Claire took a step forward, her fists clenched. "Doppler. Doppler. 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 You think you can intimidate me into giving up?" she asked, her voice laced with defiance. "I don't care what your plans are. Those paintings don't belong to you, and I'm taking them back." Carrington chuckled softly, the sound more chilling than comforting. "You're already too late. The paintings were never just about money. They were always part of a much bigger plan. You've become a player in a game you don't understand, and now it's too late to back out." Claire's heart raced as she processed his words. It was becoming clear that Carrington wasn't just some art dealer. There was a far more complex story behind the paintings and the Drummond family than she had ever imagined. They weren't just valuable for their artistry. The Drummonds had been involved in something much deeper, something tied to a secret network that had operated for decades, dealing in hidden treasures, stolen art, and a vast collection of wealth that had been kept out of the public eye. She needed answers. And for the first time since this whole ordeal started, Claire felt out of her depth. But she couldn't back down now. She had already come too far. "What do you mean by bigger plan?" Claire demanded. "Who is this all for?" Carrington's gaze softened, almost as though he were pitying her. "It's not something you'll ever be able to understand, Claire. The Drummonds were more than just art collectors. They were custodians, guardians of a treasure that needed to stay hidden away from the eyes of the public and certain people who might want it for themselves. Claire's mind spun. The paintings weren't just a collection. They were part of a secret legacy. She didn't know exactly what that legacy was, but she was determined to find out. "I don't care what kind of game you think you're playing," Claire said, her voice firm. "I'm not giving up. I'll find out what you're hiding, and I'll get those paintings back." Carrington's smirk faded, replaced with something colder. "Good luck with that, Claire," he said, his tone deadly. "You'll need it." For days after her meeting with Carrington, Claire couldn't stop thinking about the cryptic words he had left her with. She knew she was in over her head, but there was no turning back now. She had to get the paintings back no matter what. She had already lost Mark's trust, but the situation had grown beyond betrayal. The deeper she dug, the more she realized how many people were involved in this dangerous world. People who wouldn't hesitate to do anything to keep the truth hidden. Determined to find out more about the Drummond legacy, Claire turned to someone who might know more than she did, Mrs. Winthrop at the Historical Society. Claire had a feeling the elderly woman knew something she hadn't shared. It was time to dig deeper. Claire drove to the Historical Society with a new sense of urgency. When she arrived, Mrs. Winthrop was just locking up for the day, but Claire caught her before she could leave. "I need your help," Claire said, her voice urgent. "I need to know everything about the Drummonds. Their art collection, their legacy. There's something more to this than I realized, and I can't figure it out on my own." Mrs. Winthrop hesitated, then motioned for Claire to follow her into the back of the building. "I've been meaning to tell you something, Claire," she said quietly, glancing around as if making sure no one could overhear. "The Drummonds weren't just art collectors. They were involved in something much bigger, something secret." Claire's heart raced as she listened intently. "The paintings you found, they're part of a collection that was meant to be hidden. But there was more to it. A set of coordinates, a map hidden in one of the pieces," Mrs. Winthrop continued. "The Drummonds had been safeguarding something incredibly valuable, something that could change everything." "Coordinates?" Claire repeated, her mind racing. "What do you mean?" "The Drummonds didn't just collect art. They were part of a network of powerful people who knew about certain treasures, hidden in plain sight. The paintings were just the beginning. What they were protecting wasn't just art, but a key to something much bigger, something that could alter the balance of power." Claire's stomach twisted with fear and excitement. The Drummonds had been guarding something for decades, and now she had stumbled upon it. The paintings, the maps, everything was connected. But to what? "Where are the coordinates?" Claire demanded. "Tell me everything." Mrs. Winthrop nodded, her face pale. "The coordinates are hidden in one of the paintings. If you can find them, you'll uncover what the Drummonds were protecting. But be warned, Claire, there are people who would kill to get their hands on it." Claire's heart pounded in her chest. She had to find the coordinates and fast. There was no telling who was after them, but she knew one thing for sure: she was in a race against time. Claire sat alone in the back room of the train station, the door locked behind her. The weight of Mrs. Winthrop's words lingered heavily in her mind. Coordinates hidden in one of the paintings. It felt like a ridiculous theory at first, but the more Claire thought about it, the more it made sense. The Drummonds hadn't just hidden their art, they had hidden a treasure map, a key to something much bigger. Her fingers trembled as she went through the paintings once more, inspecting them for anything unusual. The portraits, the landscapes, and the abstract pieces all seemed so ordinary on the surface. But Claire wasn't looking for ordinary. She was looking for something hidden, something that would lead her to the coordinates Mrs. Winthrop had mentioned. It was the portrait of Elias Drummond that stood out to her. The man in the painting had an enigmatic expression, his eyes seeming to follow her as she moved around the room. Claire had noticed the faint inscription on the bottom of the frame before, but now she examined it more closely. The name, Elias Drummond, was written in small, precise letters, but there was something else beneath it. Her eyes narrowed. She gently ran her finger along the bottom of the frame, feeling for any hidden markings. Nothing. But then, her eyes landed on the edges of the canvas. The fabric was worn, and it seemed like there was something tucked into the folds of the frame. Claire carefully pried at the fabric, her heart pounding with anticipation. With a small rip, a hidden compartment was revealed. Inside was a tiny rolled-up piece of parchment, no bigger than her thumb. Claire's hands shook as she unrolled it. There, written in old, faded ink, were numbers. Coordinates. Her breath caught in her throat as she read them. The numbers were precise, and they didn't seem like a random string of digits. They were a map to something hidden. Claire's pulse quickened as she realized the truth. The Drummonds hadn't just been art collectors. They had been protectors of something far more valuable, something that could change everything. She quickly stuffed the parchment back into the frame and secured it, her mind racing with the possibilities. The coordinates led to a location, but where? And what would she find once she got there? Before she could process everything, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from Mark. "I know what you found. Meet me at the old barn tonight. Don't bring anyone." Claire's blood ran cold. Mark knew. Somehow, he knew exactly what she had discovered. And that meant one thing. She was in even deeper than she had imagined. That night, Claire drove to the old barn, where Mark had told her to meet him. The drive was long, and the road was winding, leading her into the dense woods. She had no idea what to expect from this meeting, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change forever. Mark's cryptic message had only deepened her suspicions. She knew he was involved with Carrington somehow, but why? What was his role in all of this? The barn loomed ahead, its weathered wood blending into the shadows of the trees. Claire parked her car a safe distance away and got out, her eyes scanning the area. There were no lights on inside, and the barn appeared abandoned. Still, she had learned by now that appearances meant nothing. This was where Mark had asked her to meet, and she wasn't going to back down now. As she approached the barn, the door creaked open. Mark stood there, waiting for her, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. His expression was unreadable, but Claire could see the tension in his posture. He was nervous, and that made her even more uneasy. "Claire," he said quietly, his voice hoarse, "I didn't want to get you involved in this. But now it's too late." Claire's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about, Mark?" she demanded. "What have you gotten me into?" Mark hesitated for a moment, then looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Claire. You found something. Something that people would kill for." Claire stepped closer, her fists clenched at her sides. "I know what I found, Mark. The paintings, the coordinates, it's all connected, isn't it? This isn't just about art, is it?" Mark nodded slowly, his gaze shifting to the ground. "The Drummonds weren't just protecting their collection, Claire. They were guarding a treasure. Something that was never meant to be found. The coordinates you found, they lead to it." Claire's mind raced as she processed his words. "So Carrington, all of this, it's about finding that treasure?" Mark nodded again, his expression darkening. "Carrington's not the only one after it. There are other people, powerful people, who've been hunting the Drummonds' legacy for decades. And now, they know you're involved. You need to leave this behind before it's too late." Claire's blood ran cold. She wasn't sure if she could trust Mark anymore, but one thing was clear. She couldn't back down now. The treasure, whatever it was within reach, and there was no way she was walking away without finding it. "I'm not running, Mark," Claire said, her voice steely. "This is my chance to end this, to finally uncover the truth." Mark looked at her, his face etched with fear. "You're making a mistake, Claire. You don't understand the danger you're in." But it was too late. Claire was already stepping into the barn, determined to find out what had been hidden for so long. She was trusting the process now, even if it meant facing the unknown. The barn smelled of aged wood and earth, the silence almost suffocating as Claire moved cautiously through the dimly lit interior. Mark had remained at the entrance, his figure just a shadow in the doorway. He hadn't followed her inside, which made her uneasy. He was either too scared to be involved any further, or he had an agenda of his own. Claire's gaze swept across the barn. There were crates and piles of old farming equipment, nothing that stood out at first glance. But she knew she wasn't looking for anything ordinary. The treasure she was after was hidden, just like the paintings. The coordinates had to lead somewhere in this barn. She approached the far corner, where a pile of discarded furniture sat under a heavy layer of dust. Claire's instincts kicked in, and she began rummaging through the old chairs and crates, moving everything aside with urgency. Each passing second felt like it mattered. The moment she'd been working toward, uncovering what the Drummonds had spent their lives protecting, was within her grasp. Her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic beneath the old blankets. Claire's heart skipped a beat as she pulled away the fabric, revealing a small iron chest. It was antique, adorned with intricate designs that matched the old-world aesthetic of the Drummond paintings. The chest was locked, but that wasn't a problem. She'd dealt with locks before. Claire pulled a small tool from her pocket, her hands steady despite the tension coiling in her stomach. It took only a few minutes to release the lock with a sharp click, and the lid creaked open slowly. The chest's contents were covered with more cloth, and Claire's fingers trembled as she lifted it, revealing stacks of yellowed documents and maps, wrapped tightly in brown leather. The first sheet she pulled out was a map, drawn in fine ink, showing the very coordinates she had uncovered earlier. But there was more annotations, symbols, and even dates that made Claire's pulse race. The maps led to various locations across the globe, each marked with a different set of coordinates, but all connected to the Drummonds in some way. This was it, the key to the Drummonds' legacy. But it wasn't just art they had hidden. The maps were a part of a much larger, more dangerous network, one that involved a treasure trove of historical artifacts, lost civilizations, and, perhaps, an unimaginable fortune. The Drummonds had kept these artifacts out of the hands of the wrong people, and now Claire was holding the map that could unravel it all. The air felt thick with the weight of history and power as Claire folded the map carefully. She didn't have time to examine everything now. The danger was real, and she knew that there were others, far more powerful, who would stop at nothing to get their hands on this treasure. She turned to Mark, still standing at the doorway. His face was pale, and his jaw was tight, as though he had seen a ghost. "I found it," Claire said, her voice steady but filled with the intensity of the moment. The treasure. The Drummonds weren't just hiding art, they were protecting something much bigger. Mark swallowed hard, his expression shifting from fear to something darker. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Claire." But Claire didn't want to hear it. She had the map. Now, it was up to her to finish what the Drummonds had started. As Claire and Mark stood in the barn, the weight of the discovery settled heavily on Claire's shoulders. She had found the treasure, or at least the key to it, but the real danger had only just begun. The Drummonds had hidden these secrets for a reason. They hadn't just guarded art or artifacts. They had safeguarded knowledge that could bring power and destruction to those who knew how to use it. Mark's warning echoed in Claire's mind as they made their way back to the car. He had told her she didn't understand what she was involved in, but she felt more certain than ever that this was the right path. She was no longer just a woman trying to fix up a forgotten station. She was part of something far larger than she had ever anticipated. Claire had to leave. She needed to get out of town, to find the next piece of this puzzle. But there was one thing she had to do first. When they returned to the station, Claire could feel the weight of the building around her. The air seemed heavier, as though it too was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. She couldn't stay here much longer. The stakes were higher than she had imagined, and the people after the treasure would stop at nothing to find it. "I have to leave," Claire said quietly, looking at Mark. "I need to find out where these coordinates lead next. But you should go too. They'll be looking for anyone who's connected to me." Mark's expression softened, and for a moment, Claire could see the brother she had once known, the one who had always been there for her. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice low. "You're in this now, Claire. And so am I." Claire hesitated. Mark had already betrayed her once, and she wasn't sure she could trust him again. But at that moment, there was something in his eyes, something that told her he was telling the truth. He was in this with her, whether she liked it or not. "Fine," Claire said, "but we have to move fast. There's no time to waste." She grabbed the map, holding it tightly in her hands. The coordinates were just the beginning. But the next step was clear. Whatever lay ahead, Claire was ready. She had come too far to back out now. This was her story, and she would finish it, no matter the cost. Claire had always thought she was a person who could handle whatever life threw at her. But standing in the parking lot of an unmarked warehouse, she was starting to doubt her own courage. She had followed the coordinates from the map, and now she stood at the threshold of something far bigger than she could ever have imagined. The treasure the Drummonds had protected, the key to everything they had left behind it, was here. The warehouse looked abandoned, its steel frame rusted and weathered, as though it had been forgotten by time. A single, flickering light illuminated the entrance, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the danger, the weight of it pressing down on her. Whoever was waiting inside knew exactly what she had, and they were ready to take it from her. Mark was beside her, his jaw clenched tight. His eyes darted nervously as he scanned the area. "This is it, Claire," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't go back now." "Are you sure you want to do this?" Claire swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the map. "There's no going back. I've come this far. I have to see it through." With a nod, Mark stepped forward, and Claire followed, her heart hammering in her chest. As they neared the door, a shadow stepped out from the darkness, a tall figure with cold, calculating eyes. "Carrington." "So, you found it," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I was wondering how long it would take." Claire's blood ran cold. "You knew?" she asked, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. "You knew what the Drummonds were hiding, didn't you?" Carrington smiled, stepping closer. "I've been tracking this treasure for years, Claire. But it's not just about the treasure, it's about power. And you're in the way." A chill ran down Claire's spine. She had come here for answers, but now it seemed as though she had walked right into a trap. The treasure wasn't just a collection of priceless artifacts. It was a weapon, a tool to control the world. And Carrington wasn't the only one who wanted it. "I won't let you take it," Claire said, her voice steady. "This belongs to the Drummonds, to history." Carrington's expression darkened. "History? No, Claire. It belongs to those who can wield it. And I plan to wield it." Before Claire could respond, a series of footsteps echoed from behind her. She spun around, only to find a group of men who looked like they were here for one thing: to take the treasure by force. Claire's pulse raced. This wasn't just about the paintings anymore. This was about survival, and she had to act fast. "We're not leaving here without that treasure," she said, her voice filled with determination. "No one is." The standoff in the warehouse felt like it lasted an eternity. Carrington stood in front of Claire, a smirk on his face, as his men moved closer. The dim light flickered, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. Claire's heart raced as the realization hit her. She had no backup, no way out, and the men surrounding her had the advantage. But she wasn't going to give up. Not now, not after everything she had sacrificed. She had uncovered the Drummonds' legacy, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it away. Mark, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward. "Claire," he said, his voice low, "we can't take on all of them. This isn't a fight we can win." Claire's eyes locked onto his. She could see the fear in his eyes, but also something else. He had betrayed her once, but now, it seemed like he was finally ready to stand by her side. "We don't need to fight," Claire said. "We need to outsmart them." Carrington's smirk faded. "Outsmart me? You've been out of your depth since the moment you found those paintings. You think you're clever. But you're just a pawn in a game you don't understand." Claire's mind raced. She had no weapons, no reinforcements, just her instincts and the map. The treasure was hidden, but she didn't need to reveal its location just yet. The real treasure was the information she had. She could still turn the tables. Without warning, Claire lunged for the map in her pocket. The room erupted into chaos as the men surrounding her tried to grab her. But Claire was faster. She tore the map in two, throwing one half to Mark. "Go. Get to the car now," she shouted. Mark hesitated, but then nodded. "I'll meet you there," he said, taking the torn piece of the map and bolting for the door. Carrington's eyes widened in fury. I think you can escape with that?" he yelled, reaching for Claire, but it was too late. Mark was already gone, and Claire had just bought them enough time to disappear. Claire's legs moved faster than she thought possible. She darted around the room, weaving through the men trying to chase her. With one final glance back, she caught Carrington's enraged expression. But she wasn't about to let him have the treasure, not now, not ever. The legacy of the Drummonds wasn't just about hidden treasures or powerful secrets. It was about preservation, about protecting what was important. And Claire had learned that the true treasure was never about wealth or power. It was about standing up for what was right, and for the future of those who would carry the story forward. As Claire ran into the night, she knew that the real battle was just beginning. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had found her purpose, and nothing, not Carrington, not the past, could take that from her. The Drummonds' legacy lived on, and so would Claire's.